tears, even if it's not sad.
I agree. Me too.
I don't know why. There's just such output, a human output, vulnerability.
Because it's brave, yeah. It's brave to be that vulnerable. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think we kind of all, I mean, not all of us, but I'm so desperate to try and be open, even though most of the time, I'm a pain, I so want to be that when you're sitting in the dark and you're watching somebody be just so vulnerable and open, it's inspiring and it's really moving. And it's also you can feel the community. I don't know how you think about it, but you can feel the community of particularly musical theater. There's such a deep support. When I was doing that show that I was talking about before, we had so many swings, as we moved into like the actors who come in and out. And on stage, when you're doing a play with no music,
right,
you have understudies, but very rarely do they come out. You know?
Right.
When you're doing a Broadway musical, people are interchanging parts constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are other factors. There's voice, there's dance, someone's injured, something happens, and so the level of skill it takes. People know 3 or 4 parts at a time while they're playing one other part. And then one night someone comes in and they're playing the other part, and someone else has moved in for them. And right before the show, everyone is so loving and supportive of the people who are coming in to play these parts.
Yeah.
They are just buoyed up by the cast. I didn't experience that as much in plays. Like, straight actors don't have the same kind of, like, just full-hearted, like, I'm going to give you everything tonight, because music does something to people.
Yeah, because it's the collaboration is literally you're singing at the same time. You're engaged in the same piece of music. Where unless you can look at a whole play as a singular piece, I think most actors in plays, depending on what their character is, are kind of selfish animals. And you're just looking for that you just want to be present for the other people, the other actors in your moments. But I would imagine with singing, it's sort of like we're singing. There's none of that. We're present.
But I think silence has a lot to do with it too.
With musicals?
What you notice, I feel like when you do a play, is that you can hear the audience so much more clearly. You can hear when a cell phone goes off. You can hear when somebody's doing something. When you're
coughing
doing a
guy.
Musical. Oh yeah. When you're doing a musical, you can't hear any of that stuff. Like unless there's a sort of like an ebb in the music, you can't hear any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a sense of when an understudy comes on to play a role in a moment, and when I've had to cover something for someone, there's this silence is never ending. There's no music on either side. It's just you with lines you kind of know.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess other people would be more scared of a downbeat and music playing and a 22-piece orchestra behind them. But I think the silence is actually more terrifying.
No, silence is horrible, especially
if you don't. And your brain.
Oh yeah, and in that moment where you're like, I could fuck up, where you just want to disappear or cry.
Yeah, but then if you cry, everyone's like, oh, that was amazing.
I know it wasn't in the play and had nothing to do with anything, but you really.
What a choice.
What a choice. Yeah.
What a choice.
Thank you. It was a choice because I didn't know what the lines were. And I was truly sad in that moment. So that's interesting to me that you think of theater as being, sort of part of your DNA from when you were a kid. So when you're put in a position to be able to produce things, you connect with it directly like that.
Well, yeah, the company that I started, I guess it's like 6 or 7 years ago now. We started to produce the things that I was in. It was just such a wonderful process, and so then we started thinking, well, let's find artists that we love and want to support, and try and bring their stories to the stage, and then bring those stories, if they're already on the stage, to a larger audience. And that was really the goal with Slave Play. There was this incredible piece of work. It was challenging. It was provocative. And I thought, when I finally met with Jeremy O. Harris, who wrote it, his goal was to bring a story like that to a larger audience and to do it in a way that was authentic and his own. And, the way I look at theater, particularly Broadway, is there's a kind of, I don't know, there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful, but there's a way in which it's always been done. And that's beautiful we're a much younger company. We're pretty ambitious, and we just wanted to break it open.
Yeah.
You have a certain number of theaters. There's a set schedule all the time. The same kind of 5 or 6 producers are putting things in at different times. And I was just thinking, I'd love to mix it up and be a part of things that do. And when I saw Slave Play, I said, maybe we can help them. And Jeremy was like, I would love that. It just went along with the spirit of his show to have a younger group of producers, bring it there. So that was Slave Play. And it just shocked me and hit me in a way that I want theater to do. I mean, I remember walking out of the show for the first time and thinking, this is why I go to the theater. And I haven't felt that in a long time.
This one sounds like one of those things where, there's provocative is one thing, but something that kind of pushes buttons to the point of being controversial is not something you necessarily see on Broadway.
Yeah, I mean, you're dealing with race, you're dealing with sex, you're dealing with relationships, and
all in one.
The thing for me about right,
yeah.
Well, when you're dealing with, I remember when I saw Fun Home, for instance. Did you see Fun Home? The shows. I remember when I saw Fun Home at the Public Theater, which is an incredible musical. And I remember not knowing anything about actually Alison Bechdel's based on a graphic novel, and I remember I didn't really know her work at the time. And I walked in the Public Theater and I saw this piece, and it, I walked in sort of hesitantly. I was alone. I was told to go see it by a friend who said it was wonderful. And I was sort of unsure the first 5 minutes. And then after the first 5 minutes, I ended up sort of weeping through the entire show all the way home. And the show is about a gay female cartoonist whose father was gay and who never came out and ends up killing himself. And she ends up telling a story about her own journey through all those same questions through him. Now, when you hear that, you go, how is that fully relatable to a wider audience? It was all about family. Yeah. And all about the secrets that we hold from each other, the fear we have within our families. Yeah. Not just the secrets of sexuality or whatever it might be. The secrets that we the ones that feel so big to us, but would be so small to other people. Sure. That when you told to someone else, they go, what the hell? What's the big deal? Just tell your dad. Just, whatever it might be. Yeah. And it hit me so deeply in my heart. And I felt that way about Slave Play. That somehow when I watched it for the first time, I thought, I have so much to learn. I see the world in a particular way because of my position, and it cracked me open. And yeah, so when you say it's not just provocative, when I say provocative, I mean that. I mean it like knocked at my heart, and it made me say like, hey, you got a lot of shit wrong here, right? And also, you're on the right track, kind of. There was a thing about it that I wanted other people to feel. I hoped other people would feel. And as a producer, I think that when you get that feeling like you do as an actor, where you watch a performance and you're envious, you wish you were in that show. Yeah, right, yeah. It's the same thing. It's like you see the show and you go, I want to be a part of this. How can I be a part of this? I was just lucky enough to get in a space where I could. And the one you acted in, Seawall, A Life, I watched a bit of a monologue on that guy's radio show. Oh right. Yeah. On NPR. Yeah. I mean, that show was a long journey, and one that I would say was, I did a show called Constellations, written by Nick Payne, who about 6 years ago, maybe more now, I don't know. Time has warped. Yeah, it's hard to know. Every day's a week. Yeah, I know. Or every week is a day. That's something. Should we get into that? Or anyway, only if you can. Only if it's epigenetic in terms of our. Okay, cool. I'm really glad we didn't follow that one. I closed that door pretty quickly, thank God. Nick is a beautiful playwright. I've done two of his shows, and while we were doing this other show, I asked him how he came up with the idea of it, because Constellations, the show that I did, was about a love story taking different universes, and there were like 75 scenes over 90 minutes of a love story between two people. and it was ultimately about different universes in which a couple splits up, where a couple comes back together after splitting up, where she passes away. There's a lot happened.
Yeah.
And he said, I was inspired when my father died about the idea of, quantum theory and the idea that there are potentially other universes. Right. And it gave me comfort to think that my father and I existed. We do still exist in another universe. And so he said, I wrote this thing that I actually performed, and I'll send it to you, which is how I first was inspired to write it. And he sent it to me, and it was about the passing of his father. And it was just one of the most incredible things I've ever read. Mm. And over 5 years after we finished that show, about every 6 months, I would ask him, can I just do this in a black box somewhere?
Yeah.
Can I just perform this thing?
Right.
And he said no. Over and over
Why?
again.
Too personal?
No. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think, I just felt like it's not a character. It's like, why would you do it?
It's just me.
And then it's me. It's talking about the experience of losing my father.
Yeah.
And it was cathartic, and it was important for me to write and express. Like, he actually performed it at the Royal Court upstairs in a small theater. I think 3 nights he performed it. He just read it from a piece of paper, and that was it. He had expunged it, and that was done. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, after a few years, I just came back to him, and he finally sort of started thinking about it. And then weirdly, this convergence of Tom Sturridge, who's a wonderful actor, he wanted to do this monologue by Simon Stevens, and they have these similar themes. And Simon Stevens and Nick Payne, both of the authors, are very close friends. And so all of a sudden Nick said, maybe it could work, maybe it could work. And then he started to rewrite it. And he started to rewrite it about the birth of his daughter, who he had just had a year prior, and the death of his father, and how the two of those things sort of came together in his mind at the same time. And we just started working on it, and worked on it over a year, at the Public Theater, really, or 6 months when we performed at the Public Theater, and then brought it to Broadway. And it was just one of these experiences of talking to people about life and death.
Right. Yeah. And it kind of bounces back and forth between the experiences, like that monologue that I saw. You did it 10, 12 minutes. But that was... Yeah. But that wasn't a compilation. That was a chunk of the actual piece, right?
Yeah, and oddly on NPR, in a show like that, it feels like someone's doing a piece on NPR.
Sure.
Yeah. It was like a story being told.
It did seem like that. He's just who's this guy talking about this thing? Why does he keep bouncing back and forth from birth to death? Yeah,
it's like the second part of This American Life,
exactly.
But in the context of the regalness of theater, it gave a kind of sacredness to the real, the mundane kind of
I love that, man.
What it is.
Where you can take a room like that, where you could take one of those giant theaters that was built to house spectacle and make it an intimate space, and all the emotions that come with that. That's the best.
That was I spent a year doing that, and the stories that came from people are the reason why we just continued to do it. Because we would go backstage after the show.
Yeah.
And normally where people go oh, please, yeah, sure, I'll take a picture or whatever. Yeah, I'll sign your playbill. Yeah. There's that exchange.
Yeah.
It was it was an experience where people would come back and they would just share their stories of relationships with their parents, or the loved ones they've lost.
Grief.
And grief. But joy.
Sure.
I mean, all of it together in a space, and it just created this community of people. I mean, and then we would have these talkbacks after the show, which
you did
normally,
really,
2 times a week. We were doing these talkbacks where people would stay, and it was some of the best times as a performer that I've ever had. Was being able to. It really, in thinking about how we don't have theater right now.
Yeah.
It was exactly the reason why I do theater, and I never knew it. You never get that kind of interaction particularly because you're very rarely, I mean, you do,